Hello, everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below before you are finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So yesterday, there were some really important and critical runoffs happening in the state of Texas for the U.S. House of Representatives and for the state legislature. And I did a preview of them this past Sunday in this video right here, and I thought it would be important to make another video recapping what happened, and there were some very mixed results to say the least. The most high-profile race of the night was in the 23rd Congressional District in Texas. The incumbent, Tony Gonzalez, barely squeaked by his challenger, Brandon Herrera, the much more conservative candidate in the race, and Gonzalez barely held on by 400 votes and under 2 percentage points. A really heartbreaking result that Herrera came so close when many people thought he would lose by a little bit wider of a margin. But instead he was knocking on the door, which is great because it shows that conservatives in this district were not happy with Gonzalez and were motivated to get out and vote for Brandon Herrera, who ran a great campaign. Gonzalez was just being nasty the entire campaign, calling his opponents names, and just being your typical slimy politician, saying whatever he needs to say to stay in power and get reelected, slandering his challenger, making up fake stories and running with them. And if conservatives don't show up in the district to support Gonzalez in November and he goes down to his Democrat opponent, I actually don't think that would be the worst thing in the world, because he does not deserve Republicans' vote. He's done nothing to deserve it. He's backstabbed his voters on immigration, gun control, social conservative issues. He's been a disaster in Congress. And Brandon Herrera came painfully close to being a big upgrade in this seat. I would quietly not be upset if Gonzalez lost in November because conservatives did not vote for him, because he really brings nothing to the table. And we can see the district map here of the vote last night. Tony Gonzalez is in the red and Brandon Herrera is in the yellow. And Brandon Herrera actually won the majority of the counties in the district, which is pretty crazy. And we can see he actually lost by only 1.4, under 2%, as I said. So while it is a net positive that Herrera did so well, better than expected, which should light a fire under Tony Gonzalez's butt to actually be a better representative for his constituents and have a better voting record, and it also gives Herrera, a first-time candidate, a boost going into a future election cycle, showing that he can actually run a great campaign. He was a positive candidate. He did not stoop to Tony Gonzalez's level. He didn't call him names. He didn't come up with attacks on his character or make up fake stories about him. He attacked him on policy, on his voting record. So anyone calling him a far-right lunatic is just gaslighting you. He was a respectable conservative candidate, and he was called far-right because he's further to the right than whatever Tony Gonzalez is, which is an establishment Republican that gets nothing done for Republican voters and caves to the Democrats. That's why Herrera's name was trashed so much by Tony Gonzalez and the media. So while primary challenges are a net positive overall, it was still tough to see Brandon Herrera overperform so much to the point where he got so close to the finish line but just couldn't pull it off. And that's why it's disappointing that Donald Trump decided to stay out of this race and not endorse Herrera. His endorsement might have put him over the finish line. So if Gonzalez doesn't shape up, I hope Herrera starts preparing for 2026. And in the other key congressional runoffs, Craig Goldman won in the 12th District, 63-37 against John O'Shea, which is a bit of a shame because John O'Shea is the more conservative candidate in this race. Goldman is nothing special. He's the majority leader. He seems much more of an establishment Republican, even though he's decent on some policies. He also voted in the state house last year to impeach Ken Paxton. So forgive me for being really suspect of the guy and expecting him to be another establishment Republican in the U.S. House. Hopefully, he will have a little bit better voting record than Kay Granger, who's the current incumbent in the seat and a massive RINO, but that's a really low bar to clear. And in the 28th District, Jay Furman won resoundingly with 65% of the vote to Lazaro Garza Jr.'s 35% of the vote. He is a solid conservative candidate, and he's going up against Henry Cuellar, the incumbent in this Democrat seat. It's a lean Democrat seat, and Cuellar has some scandals now, which we can talk about more later time, so this is a very winnable seat for Republicans, depending on how good of a campaign Furman runs and how well funded he is in November. If Trump does well in southern Texas like he did in 2020, and the Hispanic vote continues to shift to the right, I think this is a very real pickup opportunity for Republicans. And for it being a runoff, I didn't think almost 13,000 votes was that bad. It was roughly half of the votes Republicans got in the primary, which is pretty good turnout for a runoff, where the amount of people voting usually drops off drastically from the regularly scheduled primary. So it shows that Republicans are engaged and enthused to turn out in this seat. So that was a positive result from last night. Another negative one we have to talk about, unfortunately, is in the 21st State House District in Texas, where the RINO State House Speaker, Dade Phelan, pulled off renomination by the skin of his teeth against his conservative, Trump-endorsed challenger, David Covey, by a weirdly exact margin that Tony Gonzalez beat Brandon Herrera by, 50.7 to 49.3, a 1.4% margin of victory. Except this time, the incumbent held on by less than 400 votes. It was extremely close and another heartbreaker for conservatives. The two biggest RINOs in trouble in these runoffs both won by 1.4% of the vote. Very tough to see, especially since Texas runoffs are only semi-closed primaries. And that means that no Democrats that voted in the Democrat primary can vote in this runoff. Only Republicans that voted in the Republican primary can vote here. But that comes with a caveat. Registered Democrats that did not vote in the Democrat primary can still vote here. It's a very weird system. It's a little bit hard to explain and understand. And that's something that the next session of the state legislature in Texas needs to rectify. They need to make the primaries and the runoffs close, that no Democrats can meddle in Republican primaries, because Dade Phelan won off of Democrat votes. The Democrats prop him up because he caves for the Democrats. He's basically a Democrat, and Democrat voters saved him. That's the long and the short of it. Without Democrats being able to vote in this runoff, you can see this slim margin of under 400 votes. That would go away. It would break in favor of Covey. You can take it to the bank. I would make a bet on it. So that needs to be rectified in the next session of the state legislature in Texas. So that was the really, really ugly news from last night, was Tony Gonzalez and Dade Phelan pulling out heartbreaking victories. The bad news, but not unexpected, was Craig Goldman winning in the 12th district. But in addition to Jay Furman's victory in the 28th district, there was a lot of good news last night. There was a lot. And that's the silver lining. If we look to the other state legislative runoffs happening, in addition to Dade Phelan's seat, there were a lot of down-ballot conservative victories to be found. Dade Phelan was one of 8 RINO incumbents that were forced into a runoff. And only one of them beside Dade Phelan, Van Dever in the 1st district, survived. All of them got primaried out. You had Holland in the 33rd district going down to Pearson, 56 to 44. You had Coempo losing to Schoolcraft by the exact same margin. Kerwin beat Dwayne Burns, 58 to 42. Richardson shellacked Fraser, 68 to 32. Hopper beat Stuckey in a massive upset, 58 to 42. I honestly thought she was going to hold on. And Lowe knocked off Click, the incumbent in the 91st district, 57 to 43, and many thought she was going to hold on. She was favored, according to many, but she lost renomination. And a similar number of RINOs from the state house just retired and chose not to seek renomination. And in the 4 runoffs for open seats where those incumbents had retired, conservatives also saw some victories. In the 12th district, Wharton won with 72% of the vote, and he is a candidate who is a big proponent of school choice, which is a big issue in Texas. I preferred Kamkar in the 29th district against Barry, who ended up winning 58 to 42, but Barry also seems like a solid conservative upgrade. And Louderback pulled out a big victory, 55 to 45 in the 30th district. He is a solid conservative candidate, a sheriff in Texas who is endorsed by many of the best people in the Republican Party of Texas. Now, unfortunately, in the 97th district, McQueenie beat out Bean, which was really shocking to me because Bean almost got 50%. She was over 49% in the primary, and yet she just stuck at the same margin here in the runoff, which was very odd. She gained no extra support percentage-wise. So that was a little bit disappointing because she was the more conservative option. And same thing for the only Republican runoff in the state Senate, where Jace Yarbrough lost 57 to 43 to his less conservative challenger. But of these 13 runoffs in the state legislature that I just went over, 9 of them went in favor of conservatives. 8 of the 13 featured RINO incumbents running for renomination, and 6 of them lost. The other 5 runoffs were for open seats, and in 3 of them, a very conservative candidate won. And even in the other 2, it doesn't seem like the worst Republican ever won those seats. So while the most high-profile races in the 12th and 23rd congressional districts and the 21st State House District unfortunately saw the RINO establishment candidate hold on and claim victory, it was overall a very positive night for conservatives, knocking off 6 RINOs down ballot and filling up the state legislature with nearly 10 new conservatives to their ranks. Knocking off incumbents is never easy, and all of the RINOs in Congress and state legislatures across the country are not going to be primaried overnight. It's a slow burn process. Keep moving the ball down the court. And last night was not without its accomplishments. While Tony Gonzalez did not go down, he got a scare put into him, and now is going to have a better voting record, or risk there being a very good likelihood that he gets primaried out next time in 2026. And while Dade Phelan hung on by the skin of his teeth and some likely help from Democrat voters, because of the other down-ballot results that were good for conservatives, it is likely that he will never be House Speaker again, that there will be a new conservative House Speaker driving the agenda in the Texas State House, since nearly 20 Republican incumbents that were RINOs, that were his friends, lost renomination between the original primary and the runoffs last night, meaning that most likely he no longer has the votes to stay in his position of leadership. And on the flip side, school choice now has enough votes to pass in Texas. It was a bittersweet night, but a lot was still accomplished.